TOA community, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, Wednesdays with Robert. This is episode 21. We are going to dive into muscle growth today and talk about what it takes. Do you have to lift heavy load? Could you do higher volume? Are you going to get the equal or the same return if you do that? We're going to talk all kinds of different hypertrophy-based options today. We're going to look at an article. It's a couple years old, but very appropriate to the topic. And then at the very end, I'm going to show you some of our secret sauce. It's my personal programming that I do for me in-house. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my limitations and some of the injuries that I've had and why I have to train this way. But I think it's pretty appropriate to the older demographic and the aging body, as that's what I'm dealing with, is probably a body that's 30 years ahead of where it is chronologically. But biologically, I'm probably 70, but I'm about to turn 43 this weekend. So anyhow, new logo. Keegan made me up a new logo here. I hope you like it. Our old logo will always give homage here to Pop. Remember, the reason that we do Wednesdays with Robert is during the time that I am recording this. Typically, we had some things come up yesterday where I wasn't able to record exactly when I wanted to. So technically, this is Thursday right now when I'm recording. But that normal Wednesday 8 a.m. time slot, that was my dad's time slot. For 2 years, Dad and I got to train in that hour. And not only did we train, but we had some of the best talks and some of the best time together. And I am so grateful for those hours that I had with him, those 2 years, all of those sessions, because I got to know my dad at a bit of a deeper level, a more personal level. He let go of a little bit of the dad hat and started to show me a little bit more of who Richard really was. And I learned a lot during those hours. And I wanted to keep that learning component engaged to this hour. And that's where we kind of grew this. It was going to be Wednesdays with Richard, but that it kind of made no sense for me then to come on screen and talk about it. So just know that every one of these episodes, it's really kind of dedicated to my dad and the idea of sharing knowledge and communicating with your community and those people, because Dad was all about community. He was all about the idea of giving back. And his whole purpose in life was to serve. That was, he would talk about that constantly. It was to help his fellow man. And so, though we have our new logo that we're moving on, there's always this dedication and this commitment with Dad as we go through this. But I hope you like this. I hope you enjoy that new logo. And we'll continue to kind of brand with both things as we go. All right, so the hypertrophy rep range, how many reps to build muscle? Shane Duquette and Marco Walker NG. I don't know if that's all his name or if those are initials that are then coming in something. I don't know what it is. Anyhow, this was October 2021. So 2 years ago, basically, this was written up. And this is in, I don't know if this article is in response to that, but just let me lay the groundwork here for you and why I found this and what's going on. So I'm in a phase personally where, and I think I've talked about this with people before, but for years of my life as a thrower, you don't train for asymmetry. You don't train for an aesthetic looking body. You train to perform, okay? In the world of throwing, everything comes about via your hips, your legs, your lower back, your trunk. So we just don't spend a lot of time working on our upper bodies. Like, we have big wide backs, we have big thighs, big hips, big butts. You know, like, that's what a thrower develops because that's what you're using to throw. Shot put, discus, hammer. Javelin's a little different because you're pulling in a way with that where you need some big upper body and you need some musculature up there. But especially in the hammer, we just hang on and lift up. And that's such a posterior chain dominant, movement pattern with rotation. So you have torque production. And at the end, you just lift and release. And so it's like a rotating Olympic snatch, basically, is with a let go. And so we just trained a lot of the backside of the body in our lower trunk, often and heavy. And so we'd bench and we'd still do all those other things. Shot putters definitely do a way more upper body but you're in a linear drive push or a rotational push. It's a big, the more upper body you have, different. So more or less, throwers are always going to have big thighs, big butts, and strong backs. And then the rest of it kind of depends. Discus throwers are right in the middle. Shot putters, definitely more upper body. Hammer throwers, not much. You're not going to see a lot of hammer throwers that have, big 24-inch biceps and, 52-inch chest and all this. So long story made longer. Because of my build, for years now, I've been trying to get my upper body to get bigger to match my lower body. Now, I understand that most older adults are not looking into that and they're not going, well, what are my asymmetries and where my body aesthetically am I going to need to try to build? The point is I want to try to build some more muscle mass, but I'm working with a body, a frame that cannot handle heavy load anymore, okay? I can't put 300, 400, 500 pounds on a bar and pull it off the ground to try to improve my deadlift. I can't put 200, 300, 400 pounds on a barbell and bench press and try to rip and tear these fibers and my body just can't handle it, okay? My joints, my ligaments, my bones themselves. I've had hip replacements, I've had all these surgeries, I just can't. So biologically, right, my body's probably 65, 70 years old, but chronologically, I'm about to turn 43. So I have to look at this and go, how do I train a body that has all these limitations, and how do I try to get a hypertrophy effect, but not cause any more damage and not use excessive heavy loads? So you have to start to look for a variety in ways to do that. Eccentric training's been a big one for me. We've definitely utilized that, and that is kind of the backbone, if you will, of all my training right now, is really emphasizing the eccentric training. That's what connected me with eccentric and why I love all the flywheels, because it really produces a great eccentric effect. And I've been benefiting from that and I have put on size and I love it. It's why we've partnered with them, why I've built them a course on how to use flywheels to work with older adults, why we continue to work together on it this day, okay? But looking further into this, if I can't use a load that really taxes me for 4, 6, 8, 10 reps, can we still get a hypertrophy effect, muscular growth, by doing sets of 15, 20, 25, 30? Can you get a hypertrophy effect for that? Because where we look at it is your joints won't be as stressed from the heaviness of the load. They're going to be stressed from the repetitions of the load. And if my muscles are strong enough to handle a lighter load over and over and over again, then, which they are, right? We can do that for most part. Then the musculature is now what's being taxed the most. And if I can push the rep count and the load just to the right point where they're both fairly taxed, but not causing any extra damage, then I can start to have success on both ends. I can increase my bone density. I can get stronger. I could get some tearing of the muscle fibers in a good way that will produce a hypertrophy-based effect. Now, when we look at older adults, we're not trying to get them bulky. We're trying to build muscle, period. So there is hypertrophy that's going to occur. We do want hypertrophy in our 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old clients. It's never too late to grow some muscle, right? Now, are they going to get Arnold-sized lats? No, that's not the goal, though. The goal is just to get muscle to grow quickly. So even though I personally might be doing these for a slightly different effect of where I am trying to create a little more size to get some symmetry, the cause and the effect and the process of how we're going to go about it is very applicable. Okay, it's very applicable. And so this article really dives deep into it, and it starts to look at, most people do 8 to 12 reps, right? And they're trying to stimulate muscle growth. And as long as the load right around 8 to 12 reps is challenging, then you're probably going to have a good effect, and you can progress this, as we go. And they look at all kinds of different studies from 3 rep maxes to 5 rep maxes, and then they start going into like reps in reserve, which means if you are lifting a certain amount of weight, there should be like a 20 to 10% reps in reserve, meaning if I lift a weight for 10 reps, okay, and I could maybe do 1 or 2 more, but that's absolutely it, then I would have a 10 to 20%, right, out of 100%, 10 reps. What's 10 to 20%? 1 or 2, right? 1 or 2 reps would give me 10 or 20% of 10 repetitions. So if I add that to the top, that would be the 11th or the 12th repetition, which means I do my 10, but my repetitions in reserve means if I had an extra 10%, I could do 11th, and if I had 20%, I could do a 12th. If I can do beyond 12, I've gone beyond my 10 to 20% reps in reserve. The load is not heavy enough. I need a heavier load. So basically a reps of reserve of maybe 2 reps, okay, on average, is kind of where we want to be. But if we go up to 20 reps, then that 10 to 20% obviously is going to increase, okay? So reps in reserve, anywhere between 10 and 20%. I like to do 10%. I think that's pretty damn close to, like, if I can do 10, maybe I could do one more rep, but even at that case, like, I'm gonna stop at 10 so I can repeat this over and over again. I've got a good taxing load, but it's not, this 100%, it's not even a 90%. But then you look at your rep calculators and it's like 90%, I should be able to do 3 reps with that heavy of a load. Like we're talking about taxing not only the system, but we're taxing it at the high end of volume. So how much pressure are we going to put back through the body doing this? Not nearly as much as we would with these heavier loads for 2, 3, or 4 reps. However, you have to take into account, well, now I'm doing sets of 15 or 20 or 25, whereas they're counting all the way up to sets of 40, right? Which, as they go through this, multiple studies looked at 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s, 12s, 15s, 20s, all the way up. Brad Schoenfeld does tons of good stuff on there. So there are a whole bunch of studies on that. Okay, they did 7 sets of 3. They had participants that did well and had result. Then the other group did 3 sets of 10. They had very good results. They had groups that did sets of 20, very good results. They had continued efforts. Here you go, 3 sets of 20 versus 3 sets of 10. Then 3 sets of 20 to 25 versus 3 sets of 9 to 12. Okay, everybody produced muscle growth, like across the board, as long as you were taxing the body by meeting the appropriate load to the rep count. Now, I know that sounds silly, but when you look at some of the cross-training efforts out there in the world that are high fitness, if you know what I mean, a lot of them are doing sets of 30 or 40 or 50. And it's just like, grab this weight and do 50 kettlebell swings. Well, if you can do 50, couldn't you probably do 60 if you could just breathe through it? And then you could probably do 70 if you just breathe through it. Like, you're not using a weight that is hard enough for you to go, I can't do another rep. Basically what happens is you just get exhausted from doing reps with a moderately light load at that point. But if all you can do is 8 swings, you're like, I cannot swing a 9th. Well, that load was so damn heavy, right? That every time you swung it, yes, there was great effect, but it's so heavy, it's putting so much stress back through your body. Where is there a happy medium? I could swing a 12 kilo kettlebell for hundreds of reps. Now it just becomes cardio. I could swing a 50 kilo kettlebell 10 times, and I cannot do another one. But the amount of stress and pressure back through my body could cause me damage, me personally, my older adults personally. So I want to find a load somewhere that, when going through this, sets of 15 all the way up to sets of 30, okay? As long as the weight that you're using, when you get to that rep count, let's say 20, we're doing sets of 20. When I get to 20, if I could do a 22 to 24 reps with that weight, then it's a good weight to use. But if I could do more than 24 reps, it's too light. I need to go heavier, okay? You need to match the intensity of the load with the intensity of the volume, and you will still get a hypertrophy-based result. The stress that comes through the body as we do this, okay, is equivalent. The musculature will still have a tearing effect, a good tearing effect that will then produce more binding sites and ultimately help you grow more muscle. It's just adding and selecting the appropriate load. And that can be very challenging to find sometimes, right? That can be really challenging to find. And so you can do reps in reserve. You could also do an RPE, a rate of perceived exertion, that's on a 1 to 10 scale. And we use that with our clients often. 1 means the weight's so light, I can do it 1,000 times, I don't even feel it. 10 is I cannot do another rep. If you asked for 20, I got 20, I'm spent. I cannot add another rep to this. I couldn't do a 21st if you asked me. How often do we get to 10s in here? Never. To be honest, we never do, right? It's just not what we train for. The ability to max and push to that level is very, very rarely, if never, performed in this weight room, okay? And as with 1 rep maxes or 2 rep maxes or even a 5 rep max, the risk for me and for my clients to push to that level just to achieve a number is not worth it. But we're not training for performance, we're training for function, okay? Now, I'm coming from this, I know I'm giving you a lot of information, I'm throwing a lot out here. The whole point to this is, how do you work with a damaged body, a body that has sensitive joints, that maybe has arthritis, that has degenerative disc, that has a hip replacement, a knee replacement, that's gone through cancer treatments, that currently has a disease that, it has MS, that has Parkinson's disease, right? Like, how do you train a body that has any or all of those things and still like, hey, we still need to get this person strong. Hey, this person is under muscled, right? We do need to, they are truly sarcopenic. They are under muscled to now their function is being lost. They are not walking well. They cannot ascend or descend stairs. They cannot get up and down off the floor. They can't reach over their head. They can't hinge and touch their toes, let alone pick up any weight and carry it, let alone pull it or press it or push it or twist it or throw it or carry it. They are severely under muscled. So how can I add a variation of training, knowing that I've got all these joint limitations and disease and injuries, but still like I have to get this result? Well, where do the volumes match? Okay. So what I'm going to give you for the guideline is the 8 to 30 rep count. Is that on my next slide, or is that the end of it? Yeah, that's the end of it. Okay. And then here's mine. Okay. The 8 to 30 rep count, I think, is a great barometer. Our clients are always going to do at least 8 repetitions, unless we're doing like get-ups off the floor or something where it's a more technical lift. But even with our snatches, even with our clean and presses, even with our heavier, hey, this is a strength-based or a hypertrophy-based day, we're going heavy. The minimum's always going to be 8 reps, okay? And then I love to have at least 2 reps in reserve. I think that's a good, safe way. I tell my clients, like, you get to a point where you're like, I could do 2 more and that's about it, then we're good. Or it's a 7 or an 8 out of 10, okay? When you get to that RPE of like a 7 or an 8, that means this load is pretty appropriate for us. If I can do the lift, the number of reps, we wanted 8 reps, we can do them, okay? Here's my thumbs up again. Sorry, I'm still learning my AI technologies here. Every time I do a thumbs up, we get this little bubble that pops up. And then if I do the 2 thumbs up, we get a celebration of fireworks. Yay! I'm still learning all this as we go. These have just occurred during presentations, during videos, and I'm now learning what they are. I have not learned how to turn them off yet. So I'm assuming there are some other hand signals that I can do that will produce other results. What if I do a thumbs down? Does it do a thumbs down and an unhappy face? Hey, it does. Okay, we're learning. Can I do Maximus? Can I do Gladiator, where they're like, oh, we don't know that one? Nope, it doesn't do the sideways one. Which way are we going? Are we going up or are we going down? Can I trick it? Can I trick my AI? Can they give me both? Nope, they're untrickable. Okay, anyway. So 8 reps is our bare minimum, right? And I'd love to have 2 reps in reserve. I think that's a very safe way to train. Can you do, let's see if I can do this without setting anything off. Can you do, number 1, can you do the reps that I've asked for? We asked for 8, I could do 8. Can you lift it with the proper technique all the way through those 8 reps? Okay, yes or no? And then can you do the tempo that I've asked for? That is the missing volume that most of us don't think about, is the tempo. And so that's where, if you look at the bottom right on my lifting tempo over here, okay, so it's right, let's see, here's my hand, right here. Everybody see that? Lifting tempos, okay? Notice in weeks 1 and 2, we have a 2x2 lifting tempo. Same with 3 and 4, lifting tempo 2x2. Then we get to weeks 5 and 6, I'm getting into more eccentric focus lifting. So for 2 weeks, we're gonna do a 4-to-1. That means when I'm squatting, I'm coming down 4, 3, 2, 1, up 1 as quick as I can. 4, 3, 2, 1. You know how difficult it is to go with a 4-second negative and a 1-second positive when I've been doing 2x2s. And you're like, well, 2x2 is 4 seconds. This is only 5 seconds. It can't be that difficult. It's very different. It's very different. The load that you're going to use has to get a little lighter because you're having to descend and control it so slowly. If you truly do the tempos proper, lifting is really, really difficult, okay? But then we go to our hurt weeks after that, and it's 1-to-1. It's as fast as I can move this thing. Now we're cranking, okay? Now, for 6 weeks, basically, my goal is to build as much muscle as I can. And then for the last 2 weeks, when we get into the more hurt component, is I want to keep that load in hand. And I still want to challenge myself. I just want to have a little bit more of a cardiovascular component. And I'm hoping that that kind of stimulates a little bit of like a cut effect, where I'm going to kind of maintain my muscle mass, but trim down just a tiny bit due to the more cardiovascular component of the higher intensities. So rep counts in this are going to get very challenging. And I'm always going to seek out a reps in reserve of 2. But as I get over 20 to 25 reps, maybe 4 reps in reserve as we start to increase. Remember, 10 to 20% of your total as you're kind of going. So I'm going to go anywhere from 8 repetitions all the way up to about 30. And I think those are really good guidelines in there. And if I'm doing the reps that I asked for, the proper technique all the way through, and the lifting tempo we're programming, we have the right load. And I would say that you are as close to guaranteeing that that person won't get hurt doing that lift as you can without 100% guaranteeing. You can never guarantee someone won't get hurt. You just can't, okay? You can say like, this is the safest version of this. This is, the least risky version of this. And those things can be true, but there's always going to be a risk. There's always going to be a chance. Just off the top of my head, the general fitness consumer, anybody just doing anything in a fitness facility, has like a 4% chance of injury. Eccentric training had like a 2.7% chance of injury. So when you slow down the tempo and you control the load a little bit more, technically and typically you're going to use a little bit lighter weight, because you have to slow and you have to control through these ranges to make that burn and that tearing effect, that eccentric control. You have to, if I'm going to do it all the way through, I've got to use a little lighter weight than I normally do. Okay. And that, to me right there, I'm controlling the range. So I'm reducing the risk of moving too quickly and hurting myself. I'm using a little bit lighter load. Awesome. I'm controlling the tempo. So I'm getting much more burn, more good tearing effects, etc. And I'm doing some rep counts in here that are within a reserve, but it's still on the high end. They're still challenging me. So I think all that sounds pretty safe and controlled and doable. It's just hard to do. And the results, as you look at all the research on eccentric training, which there's a ton of it out there, Jonathan Mike, Len Kravitz, Stuart McGill, Brad, Sean, so many great researchers. I'm leaving out tons of people, all these other people. I'm just throwing out a couple of the articles I just recently looked at. I think I have in my presentation I'm building right now, I think I referenced like 12 different eccentric training articles specific for older adults only, let alone all of the other ones that look at muscle growth and everything else. There's tons of great info out there, and eccentric training is a vitally important component to what we do. But I think it's a really good way for you to look at this and go, we're not going to overload people with too much weight and stress their joints or their muscles. We're not going to use such a light weight that we could just volume reps and just wear and tear their body to death. We're going to find somewhere in the middle where I could start somewhere around 8 to 10 to 12 reps in my first couple of weeks and build to 16s, 18s, 20s a couple of weeks later, and then maybe up to 20s and 25s. And maybe my last week I do a couple sets of 30, and I'm working with these loads that are always within this range of about 80%, a 7 or an 8, a 20% reps in reserve, however you want to look at it. It's just towards the top, but it never peaks them where we risk maximal injury or maximal load or overstress. And it's not so under volumed that they could just do it all day long and not reap the benefit of actually stressing the muscle enough to get a result. And so I know I'm beating the horse here a little bit at this point. I just want you to see where we're driving to with this. And then with my programming, this is basically just a daily, what am I going to do on Monday, on Wednesday, on Friday, and on Saturday or Sunday? What am I going to do? What's my focus? Notice every day, with exception of Sundays, there's full body training. I'm going to train all muscle groups, okay? Always going to do a push, a pull, and a press. I'm going to do some type of split. I'm going to do some type of hinge. So those 5 components I'm always going to do. But on what days am I going to do a little extra? On Mondays, I do a little extra leg work. On Wednesdays, I do a little extra chest and back. And then on Fridays, I do a little extra shoulder. And I'm talking extra, maybe 1 or 2 extra exercises, depending. But then on Sundays, it's all arms, because that's my personal weakest link, is I definitely need my arms to get bigger to match my thighs and everything else. I would love my arms to be as big as my thighs. Kidding. I think that would look probably really funky, but maybe as big as my calves. That could be cool. And then extra mobility work is a big component there. I'm going to work on my calves, my shins. I got to build more musculature around my ankles and my feet for all the rucking that I do. So those are days where I'm hooking up ankle weights around my feet and I'm working on improving my ankle strength, my dorsiflexion, my plantar flexion, my supination, my pronation. I'm building musculatures and making sure my ankles and my feet can handle all the rucking that I do, because we put in, probably put in about 20 to 25 miles a week on my rucks between 3 days, okay, in which I do Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. So that's kind of the focus of where we're going. Now, weeks 7 and 8, sets of 30 to 35. How many sets do you think I'm doing versus when I'm doing 15? Okay, the total volume on a daily basis should be pretty close, in my opinion. We can have progressions, but they shouldn't be too far off. So if I do 4 sets of 15 in week 1, that gives me 15, 30, 45, 60 total reps. But in week 7 and 8, if I just do 2 sets, I'm at 60 already, right? If I do 3 sets, I'm at 90. So I'm going to try to find a way in the beginning where my rep counts are going to be, I would say, within a 10 to 20% increase from start weeks 1 to finish. Because I don't want to stress my body too much. So my point is I might do 5 or 6 sets of 15 in week 1, but do 2 to 3 sets of 30 or 35 in week 7, 8. That's where the challenge is going to come in. Now, I personally have not done all 8 weeks of this yet. I did 2 little mock trials of this before I put it together. I just built this. I'm literally in week 1 of doing it and building my way through here. But I'm gonna anecdotally apply some of this and see how we do. Now, am I thrilled about doing sets of 30 to 35? No, but it's gonna be challenging. And am I gonna use a weight that is challenging? Yes, but it's gonna be way less load than I'm using in weeks 1 and 2. And then, do I have some lifts that my body does handle sets of 8 with a maximal load or near maximal load? A couple of them, and I can do that, right? My arms still work really well. I can still do curls with, 30s or 35s. Like, I can still challenge myself a bit with something like that, right? Which isn't super strong, but my point is I can level up and I can challenge the joints that I can challenge, but I'm not going to do sets of 30 with that. In the traditional mindset of hypertrophy training, that 80%, 85% maximal load effort or higher will still give you great results. My point is, and this whole thing is, you can do some higher repetition count volume training and still get a hypertrophy-based return. There's lots of good research, as I showed you through this article, and they reference quite a few of them. You can go and check those out. Tell me what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and I'm gonna, work through. I'm gonna do my 8 weeks, and then I will report back and let everybody know, how it went. I'm doing some basic measurements, but again, this isn't a huge concern on the idea of like how big and how quickly can we build muscle, and I got an extra 1.5 inches on my chest or blah blah blah. I'm not too concerned with that. I just want to see that some stimulus and growth has occurred, and can I do this and stress with these I'll call like mid-range weights to make sure I don't hurt my joints or hurt my musculatures that can't handle the heavy loads anymore, but still get that good result of building some muscle mass. Though this body that I use is not 70 or 80 years old, it responds in that same way. And so this is a good way for us to kind of process through this and say, would this style of training work well for our older adults? Now, I will tell you, this research for me is not groundbreaking or new information. We've been doing sets of 15, 20, 25, 30 for a decade now. I mean, I have been volume training clients like this for a long time, but our intention was not to get them big and bulky and muscular. It's never been that. It's to make them a performance-based athlete, even though they're not athletes. They want to train like a dynamic athlete, even though they're not athletes, because I want them to be ready for whatever comes their way. But at the same time, beginning of those workouts, we're doing sets of 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 with, moderately heavy loads, 80 to 80%, 1 or 2 reps in reserve, however you want to look at it. We're challenging, we're lifting, we're getting that. But then we have a conditioning component where it's like, let's do 30 swings, 30 step ups, 30 plank to push ups. Let's do 30 hinge ski erg pulls. Let's do 30 meters of pushing the tank and then dragging it back. Let's do, higher end work where they're still working load. They're still challenging themselves or working in a capacity to still stimulate some muscle growth, even though we're kind of doing our cardiovascular component at the same time. That is true HIRT. That is high intensity resistance training. The ski erg, not so much. The plank to push-ups, that's more body weight stuff. That's more HIIT training. But the squat to press, the swings, the snatches, those volume lifts that you can challenge and bring up like that. That's a great way to get people strong and conditioned. It's a true strength and conditioning program that really works well, especially for the older adults. Another episode coming soon on true HIRT training and the value for the older adult. We'll talk about that maybe in our next one. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was a spirited conversation, went a little deep on the researches and such, but you get a chance to check these articles out. Any information you have back, any questions, any comments, what have you done at home? What are these things you're practicing with your bodies and such? Let me know. I'd love to hear it. I hope you enjoyed the day. Thank you for spending 30 minutes with me. I appreciate and I love all of you. I hope you're doing really well. Continue to spread the love and good cheer to everybody around you. Be a positive light for anybody in your circle. Our body, our minds, and this world needs it. Much love to all of you. I appreciate you. Continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. Please subscribe, ring the bell, make sure you don't miss any of the content that we put out. Help us grow our community by sharing some of this information out. We really appreciate you, and we will see you next time. Peace.